I should have known Dad's birthday would be one of those nights where everyone smiled too hard. The backyard was strung with warm white lights that made the smoke from the grill look almost romantic. Paper plates bowed under ribs and potato salad. Somebody had a playlist of old Motown turned just loud enough to drown out anything honest. I stood near the sliding door, keeping my bad knee straight, gripping my crutch like it was the only thing holding me upright. Every time I shifted my weight, the brace pinched, and a sharp heat ran down my shin. Kara watched me from across the table the way people watch a magician's hands. She waited until Dad leaned in to blow out his candles, until all the phones lifted. Then she stepped between me and the cake, reached out, and snatched my crutch. The rubber tip squealed on tile. My balance went with it. I grabbed for the counter, caught air, and my knee screamed as I hit the edge. A glass skittered and shattered. Conversation died mid-syllable. Kara held the crutch up like a microphone. "Stop faking it," she shouted, voice bright with certainty. "You're just leeching." For a hot beat nobody moved. I tasted metal where I'd bitten my tongue. My hands shook so hard I couldn't push myself up. Someone laughed, small and nervous, as if the joke had been approved. I looked at Mom. She stared at the candles like she could will the moment to disappear. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to say my name, to tell her to give it back, to do anything. He didn't move. Kara leaned down close enough that her perfume filled my lungs, and she whispered 5 words that made my stomach drop. And Dad still said nothing. "My name is Maya. I'm 29, and I live on the east side of the Mesa Phoenix sprawl, where the sun feels like it has opinions and everyone's car looks dusted in the same beige film. I'm not a dramatic person. I'm the kind of person who keeps a spare phone charger in her glove box, pays bills 2 days early, and makes lists that have little checkboxes just so I can feel the relief of marking something done. Before the injury, my life was almost aggressively ordinary. I drove to my office before traffic thickened, listened to finance podcasts, and spent my days in spreadsheets, reconciling numbers that other people didn't want to look at. On Tuesdays, I went to the gym after work, nothing heroic, just a steady routine, treadmill, light weights, stretch, home. I meal prepped on Sundays. I had an emergency fund. I didn't ask my parents for money. I didn't even like asking for favors. I was the one who remembered birthdays, booked the restaurant, and showed up early with a bag of ice when the cooler leaked. If someone needed a ride from the airport, my name got texted first. In my family, that made me easy. The low-maintenance daughter. The one you didn't have to worry about. Ron, my dad, loved peace the way some people love oxygen. If there was conflict, he'd smooth it over fast, even if that meant stepping on the truth. Elaine, my mom, loved appearances. Not because she was evil, but because she believed a family's reputation was like a window. Keep it clean and nobody can see the mess inside. And Kara. Kara was the one the light naturally found. My older sister could be charming, funny, magnetic. She could also be cruel with the same smile on her face. When Kara wanted something, it was framed as ambition. When I wanted something, it was framed as need. For most of my life, I thought that was just how families worked. You adapt. You don't rock the boat. You become useful and quiet. Then I got hurt, needed help I couldn't neatly repay, and I learned compassion in my house had a price tag. Kara wasn't just mad I had a crutch. She was mad I had something she couldn't control. And the night she snatched it, she didn't start a fight. She finished one she'd been building for months. By the time Dad's birthday candles were lit, my brace felt like a vice. The neoprene trapped heat against my skin, and sweat collected under my collar even though the evening air was cooling. I kept telling myself, 2 hours. Smile, sing, go home. Ron loved birthdays the way he loved everything else in our family. Tidy, predictable, painless. Elaine had set the backyard up like a catalog photo. White lights zigzagged overhead. A plastic tablecloth snapped in the breeze. Paper plates clinked as people reached for food, and every clink felt louder because I was listening for trouble. The grill hissed. Someone popped the lid on a cooler and the smell of ice and beer rolled out. Kara floated through it all, laughing too brightly, touching shoulders, collecting compliments like change. She'd already told 3 different stories about her new job, each one making her sound like she'd been recruited by a superhero team. When she got to me, her smile tightened. "Still on that thing," she said, eyes dropping to my crutch. "Loud enough for my aunt to hear. Loud enough for my cousin to glance over." "It's temporary," I said. Calm voice. I tried to keep my hands from whitening around the grip. "Doctor's orders." Kara's eyebrows lifted in exaggerated concern. "Of course," she said, like she was humoring a child. Then she turned to the room and raised her voice. "Guys, has anyone checked if Maya's okay? She's been having a really hard time." That was the trick with Kara. She could stab you while sounding like she was bandaging you. People love a concerned villain. They don't even see the blood. I shifted my weight, careful, and pain flashed through my knee, a hot electric line that made my stomach clench. The brace pinched at the back of my leg. I focused on the ordinary sounds, forks scraping, Dad's laugh, the playlist skipping to the next song. Normal. 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 "Come on," Kara kept going, circling closer. "It's been weeks. You sure it's not? You know." She made a motion with her fingers, like quotation marks. "A vibe." I stared at her. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said, smiling, "some people like being taken care of." A couple heads turned. A couple smiles appeared, uncertain. Elaine's face did that tight thing it did when she sensed optics slipping. Ron pretended not to hear, rearranging plates near the cake like he could organize the tension away. Then Dad sat down in the center chair and everyone gathered. Phones came out. The candles went on. The cake smelled like vanilla and grocery store frosting. Ron's smile looked pasted on, stretched too thin at the corners. "Make a wish," someone said. Dad leaned in. The room inhaled. In that shared pause, Kara moved. She stepped right in front of me, fast and casual, like she was reaching for a serving spoon. Her hand closed around my crutch and yanked. The rubber tip squealed on tile. My body followed the missing support before my brain caught up. I grabbed for the counter, fingers skidding on condensation from someone's drink. My knee buckled and a raw white pain exploded up my leg. I hit the counter edge with my hip and the air left my lungs in one humiliating grunt. A glass toppled. It shattered and the sound cut through the party like a gunshot. For a second, all I could hear was my own breath, thin and panicked, and the distant hiss of the grill. Kara held the crutch up like a trophy. "Stop faking it," she announced, voice sharp and delighted. "You're just leeching." My Aunt Linda made a small noise of disgust. "Attention-seeking," she muttered, not even trying to hide it. Someone's phone was pointed at me. I saw the little black circle of the camera lens and the reflection of the string lights in it. I was on the ground, hair falling into my face, one knee screaming, and I was being recorded like entertainment. Elaine stepped forward 2 inches, then stopped. "Not tonight," she said to me like I'd planned the whole thing. Like I'd arranged my fall as a centerpiece. I looked at Ron. My dad. The man who used to carry me on his shoulders at 4th of July fireworks. He glanced at Kara, then at the guests, and his jaw clenched. "Maya," he said, low and warning, "stop making this about you." Something in me went cold. Kara crouched beside me, her smile still in place, and she leaned close enough that only I could hear. She whispered 5 words that made my stomach drop. I picked myself up off the tile like I was cleaning up someone else's mess, because that's what I'd been trained to do. I didn't look at Kara again. If I met her eyes, I'd either explode or fall apart, and she'd win either way. I pulled myself up using the counter, jaw clenched against the pain. The brace had twisted when I went down, and it bit into the back of my leg like teeth. I limped into the side hallway toward the little powder room. Behind me, the party restarted in pieces. A forced laugh, a chair scraping, someone saying, "Okay, candles, everyone." Dad's birthday song began again like they could rewind time if they sang loud enough. The bathroom light was too bright. I locked the door and stared at my reflection, cheeks blotchy, hair stuck to my forehead. I rolled my pant leg up and saw swelling blooming around my kneecap, tight and shiny already. I pressed lightly and hissed. Real pain, real injury, and somehow I was the one being treated like a liar. I ran cold water over my wrists until my breathing slowed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept replaying her whisper, those 5 words, like a curse you can't unhear. Whatever it wasn't said in anger. It was said with certainty, like she'd checked with someone first. That's what scared me most. Kara wasn't improvising. She was executing. And I knew I was targeted. Leave, my body begged. Get out. But leaving meant Kara got to narrate my exit. Elaine would call it a scene. Ron would say I'd made his birthday about me. By morning, everyone would remember me as the problem, not the girl who stole a mobility aid like it was a joke. Staying meant sitting out there without my crutch while Kara performed concern and got laughs. It was the same old choice my family offered me my whole life. Be small, or be punished for taking up space. So I chose something else. I wiped my face, unlocked the door, and walked back out like I'd only gone to fix my shoe. I didn't look for sympathy. I didn't even look for my crutch. I took the farthest chair at the table, kept my bad leg straight under it, and clapped softly when Dad made his wish. Kara hovered behind Ron's chair, smiling for the phones. He hates seeing people fight, she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. We're just worried about Maya. She's been struggling. The way she said struggling made it sound dirty. 2 seats away, Aunt Linda leaned toward someone and murmured, Maya's always had issues. Kara's just being honest. The other person hummed agreement like that settled it. I watched their mouths move and felt something inside me go quiet, like a switch flipping off. Across the yard, my cousin Ryan held his phone at chest level, pretending to text. The screen reflected the string lights, and I caught the tiny red dot of recording. He didn't stop when I noticed. He just kept filming, like my humiliation was party content. When the candles were finally blown out and everyone cheered on cue, I stood carefully, testing my knee. It held, barely. I waited until Ron was surrounded by hugs, until Elaine was cutting cake, until nobody was looking directly at me. Then I leaned toward the counter where my purse sat and reached for my crutch. It wasn't there. Kara met my eyes for the first time all night. She slid the crutch behind her leg, then tucked it under her arm and walked toward the house, casual as anything. A moment later I heard the soft click of the door lock. It was subtle. It was a warning. I didn't argue. I grabbed my keys, nodded once at my parents from a distance they could pretend not to see, and limped out through the side gate. In my car, the dome light made everything look unforgiving. My hands clamped the steering wheel while my breath hitched and my knee throbbed in waves. I stared at the swelling, trying not to cry hard enough to shake. I didn't realize that night would cost me more than my dignity. The next morning, I learned Kara didn't just humiliate me, she launched a narrative. Before I tell you how everything flipped, do me a quick favor. Like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, because I know this sounds fake when I say it out loud. I didn't win this by yelling. I won it with a folder on my laptop. 5 receipts. Time-stamped proof. The kind that changes what people are allowed to believe. And here's the part Kara didn't see coming. The video they thought proved I was faking ended up proving something else entirely. But first, you need the pattern, because Kara didn't wake up one day and decide to hate me to be why the time I needed a crutch. They'd already decided I was the kind of person who would fake one. It wasn't a single moment, not one dramatic scene where someone stood up and declared the family hierarchy out loud. It was smaller than that, which somehow made it sturdier. 1,000 tiny choices that trained everyone, me included, where the weight was supposed to land. The first time I remember understanding the rules, I was still small enough that my legs swung above the kitchen chair. Kara had been helping with something that involved a cup of juice and too much confidence. The cup tipped, and the juice slid across the table like it was looking for somewhere to hide. It found the edge, then the floor, then the corner of the rug my mom cared about too much. Kara froze, eyes wide, mouth already bending into a shape that meant she was about to become the injured party. My mom came in fast, like the sound alone had told her who to worry about. "Oh my God, Kara, are you okay?" Kara nodded once and then did the thing she was good at. She started to cry like the tears proved the innocence. Before anyone even asked what happened, I felt the familiar pressure in my chest, the knowledge that the room was choosing a story and I needed to fit myself into it. My dad looked at me. "Why didn't you stop her?" I stared at the spreading stain and the sticky shine on the tile. I hadn't touched the cup. I hadn't been standing. I hadn't even been the one who wanted juice in the first place. But I was the oldest. I was the mature one. I was, apparently, the one with hands big enough to be responsible for everybody else's. I started. My mom cut in, already grabbing towels, already steering the crisis away from Kara. "Just clean it up," she said to me, "the way you talk to someone whose feelings are optional." Then softer to Kara, "Honey, it's okay. Accidents happen." That was the refrain. Kara's mistakes were accidents. My reactions were attitudes. Kara's messes were evidence that she was spirited. My frustration was evidence that I was difficult. As we got older, the pattern didn't change so much as it upgraded its clothes. In middle school, Kara did a dance recital and forgot half the routine. She stood on stage, blinking hard under the lights, and still managed to look brave about it. Afterwards, the lobby filled with that particular kind of parental devotion. People laughing gently, calling it cute, telling her how proud they were that she got up there at all. My mom brought it up for weeks like it was a medal. The time Kara pushed through, even though she was nervous. In the same season, I got a test back with a grade that was so high my teacher wrote, "Outstanding," at the top in red ink. I brought it home and held it out like an offering. My dad barely glanced at it. "Good," he said, already turning back to whatever he was doing. "That's what we expect from you." Expected. That word was the invisible fence. Kara's wins were surprises worth celebrating. Mine were tolls I was required to pay to keep my place. The difference wasn't just in the applause. It was in what followed. Kara's achievements unlocked gentleness. If she got a good grade, she got ice cream, a new outfit, a story told at dinner. If she got a bad grade, she got support, extra help, a sympathetic talk about stress and pressure and how hard school can be. If I got a good grade, it was proof the system was working as designed. If I got a bad one, it was proof I wasn't grateful enough for what I'd been given. So I adapted. Quietly. I learned to get ahead of every accusation by becoming my own evidence. I started documenting the way some kids start drawing. I kept notes in the margins of notebooks. Who said what time things happened, what I'd done before anyone could claim I hadn't done enough. If Kara borrowed a shirt and returned it with a stain, I washed it before anyone saw. If a chore didn't get done, I did it twice as fast, so the story couldn't harden around me. I became an early warning system for other people's disappointment. I minimized my needs because needs turned into negotiations, and negotiations turned into character trials. If I could solve the problem quietly, it never had to become a referendum on who I was. The money stuff came later, and it was the same dynamic with numbers. Kara's help arrived wrapped in affection. A surprise payment toward something. Don't worry about it. We just want you to have a good start. The language was soft, almost romantic. Love expressed as rescue. There would be a little scolding sometimes, but it was playful, the way you tease someone you intend to protect. When I needed help, it came with a ledger. I can still hear the tone shift, the careful seriousness, the adult voice. "We can do this," my mom would say, "but you need to understand what this means." My dad would add, "This is a loan. We're not made of money." He'd say it as if I was asking because I was careless, not because life had teeth. If Kara needed a few $100s, it was because she was in a rough patch, and rough patches happen. If I needed anything at all, it was because I hadn't planned well enough. The help was never just help. It was a lesson. It was a warning. It was debt, not only financial but moral. And then there was the emotional physics of the house. Kara cried, and the furniture moved. If Kara was upset, the whole day could reorganize around it. Schedules shifted. Voices softened. Arguments paused mid-sentence because she was too fragile. Someone would bring her a snack, a blanket, a little joke to pull her back toward okay. Her feelings were treated like weather, something you couldn't fight, only prepare for and accommodate. If I was upset, it was treated like a performance. You're too sensitive, my mom would say, like sensitivity was a flaw in the product. You always take things the wrong way, my dad would add, like my perception was the problem, not what had been said. The message was consistent. Kara's pain proved her innocence. My pain proved my guilt. So I learned a second coping style on top of the first. I hurt privately. I swallowed the sharpness, filed it away, and went back to being useful. I became the kid who didn't make a scene, because scenes were dangerous. Scenes made you the villain, and I was already cast too often to risk improvisation. Over time, that family story hardened into a personality diagnosis. I was dramatic, high-strung, hard to please. The words floated around me like lint you can't quite brush off. If I defended myself, it was proof I was combative. If I stayed quiet, it was proof I was sulking. Either way, the conclusion was the same. I was the problem that needed managing. That's what makes the injury context so loaded. It wasn't just that I got hurt. It was that getting hurt meant I needed things. Time, space, patience, care, that I had been trained not to ask for. It meant I couldn't solve it quietly. I couldn't outwork it. I couldn't pre-clean the mess before someone noticed. I was suddenly visible in a way I didn't control. And in my family, visibility without usefulness reads as manipulation. Needing help made me suspicious by default, because they'd already filed me under difficult. If I grimaced, it was dramatics. If I didn't, I must not really be in pain. If I asked a question, I was being demanding. If I didn't, I was being passive-aggressive. Every possible response fit the story they'd rehearsed for years. Meanwhile, Kara's role was pre-written too. All she had to do was show up with the right expression, concerned, earnest, slightly burdened, and she'd be cast as the hero. The one who tries so hard. The one who gives so much. The one who is always thinking of others. It didn't matter that I was the one with the injury. The old math still held. Kara's intentions counted more than my reality. My reality was always up for debate. And that's the specific ache underneath everything. It's not only the physical pain or the inconvenience or the logistics. It's the way the injury dropped into an existing script where my needs automatically meant I was lying, exaggerating, or asking for too much. Like the moment I required care, I was on trial. So when I got injured for real, it was the perfect stage for Kara to play hero, and me to play villain. The injury itself was painfully uncinematic. No heroic limp. No dramatic fainting. Just a sharp, wrong twist that turned my body into a problem I couldn't talk my way out of. At urgent care they did the usual loop. Questions, a too bright room, a nurse pressing in places that made my eyes water before I could stop them. Then imaging. Then the doctor sitting on that rolling stool with the practiced, gentle face people where when they're about to tell you something that will rearrange your week. Nothing life-threatening. Nothing that earned instant sympathy points in my family. Just the kind of injury that's inconvenient, expensive, and slow. I left with a brace that made my leg look bulkier than it felt, a sheet of instructions that assumed I was going to be tempted to sprint, and a pain that flared whenever I pretended I could live normally. Healing, it turns out, is mostly repetition and humiliation. It's the slow routine of learning how to stand up without using the injured side. It's counting out sets of PT exercises on the floor while your muscles shake like you're doing something brave, when really you're just trying not to backslide. It's watching the world move at full speed while you measure your day in, can I make it to the kitchen without needing a break? I didn't talk about it much. I did what I always do, I documented. Receipt number 1 wasn't a dramatic smoking gun. It was a clean, boring medical timeline. My way of making the truth tangible enough that nobody could rewrite it later. Day after the fall. Urgent care visit. They noted swelling and instability. Sent me for imaging. Told me to keep weight off it. 2 days later. Imaging results posted. Not a vague maybe. A clear injury that explained why it hurt to pivot and why stairs suddenly felt like cliffs. That week, first follow-up appointment. Brace fitted properly. A plan, not a guest, PT started. A schedule printed out with exercises that looked ridiculous on paper and felt brutal in real life. Work note, restricted duties. No long standing. No lifting. Needs accommodations, in plain language that still made me feel like I was asking for special treatment. It was mundane, and that was the point. Truth, when you're dealing with people who like stories better than facts, has to be boring and organized to survive. Kara's reaction was immediate, and it wasn't concern. It came in texts that pretended to be jokes and landed like punches. Must be nice to get attention. Some of us work. Then, when I didn't respond fast enough, are you seriously milking this? The word she kept circling was leech, not always said outright, but always implied. Like my injury was a strategy. Like pain was a personality flaw. I tried to stay focused on the reality in front of me. Appointments, exercises, ice packs, the little wins that don't look like anything to anyone else. I told myself the facts would speak for themselves. Then I opened my phone and saw the first clip. Someone had posted a video from the party. Not the full thing, just a few seconds, cropped tight and trimmed mean. It started after the moment that mattered. The part where people's faces are already turned, where the energy is already spiked. In the clip, you can't see what my foot hits. You can't see how fast it happens. You can't see the angle. What you do see is me on the ground. The awkward scramble, the split second where my hands move like I'm trying to catch myself and my body lags behind. It played like a punchline, me on the floor, in a chaos moment. The caption wasn't from Kara, at least, not directly, but it had her fingerprints all over it. Something about dramatic. Something about attention. Enough for people to laugh without feeling cruel, because it was framed as me being ridiculous instead of me being hurt. I watched it once and felt my stomach drop. I watched it again and realized what made it so effective. It didn't have to prove I faked it. It only had to make it plausible. That's how this kind of character assassination works. You don't need evidence. You need a vibe. The comments were the worst part, not because they were vicious, but because they were casual. LOL. Of course. Classic. People don't realize how dangerous it is when a lie becomes a running joke. Jokes don't require proof. They require timing. I knew the truth existed on someone's camera roll. I just didn't know what else it captured. There was one cousin, everyone has one, who never talks much but always has their phone out. Always lurking at the edge of the room, collecting footage like they're building an archive. They don't start drama, but they end up holding it. So I did something I don't like doing. I asked. Not publicly. Not in the family group chat where everything becomes a trial. One direct message, carefully neutral, like I was requesting a recipe. Hey, do you happen to have the full video from the moment I fell? I'm trying to show my doctor what happened. It wasn't even a lie. Part of me did want that. Not because my doctor needed it, but because I needed the sequence intact. I needed the missing seconds that made the cropped version possible. The cousin replied a while later with no commentary, just a file. My thumb hovered before I hit play, because I already understood something my body didn't want to accept. If Kara was this comfortable calling me a leech, if she was this bold about framing me as fake, then she wasn't guessing. She was building from something. When I got the full clip, I finally understood why Kara looked so confident taking my crutch. The social consequences didn't arrive like a big confrontation. They arrived like silence. People didn't unfollow me. They didn't block me. They just stepped back. Messages I would normally get didn't come. Invitations evaporated. The group chat kept moving without me, like a river redirecting around a rock. And then the concerned texts started. Not from my close friends, the ones who actually knew me, but from relatives and family-adjacent people who had clearly been briefed on a version of events that made them feel helpful and righteous at the same time. Hey hun. Just checking in. Are you okay? You've seemed off lately. I saw the video. That looked scary. Are you sure you didn't just lose your balance? You know, stress can make you do things without realizing. They were worded like care, but they landed like accusations. Like they were calling to see whether I'd confess to being the person they'd been told I was. Even my workplace got a whiff of it. Not directly. No one emailed me a link or said Kara's name out loud, but the vibe shifted. A manager who'd always been casual became careful. A coworker started asking, too brightly, how's everything outside of work? Like they were fishing for a headline. I could feel the story spreading in the shape of people's caution. At the same time, life got smaller and more expensive. Healing wasn't just pain. It was paperwork. It was copays that hit your account with the casual certainty of gravity. It was insurance calls where you sat on hold listening to cheerful music while your knee throbbed and your patience leaked out of you. My hours got reduced, partly because I couldn't physically do what I normally did, partly because accommodating me required effort, and effort is always easier to avoid. Leave paperwork appeared in my inbox, and even though it was standard, it made me feel like I'd been labeled. I started counting everything in a way that made me feel ashamed. Not just the pain meds. Counting those, too, because I didn't want to run out and I didn't want to take too many and I didn't want anyone to have another reason to call me dramatic. But groceries. Gas. The exact cost of a bag of oranges. The way I'd stand in an aisle and do math like my life depended on it, because in a small way, it did. I kept receipts folded into my wallet until the edges frayed. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being responsible. Kara tightened the narrative like she was pulling a drawstring. She didn't just call me a leech anymore. Now I was unstable. Unstable meant she could interpret anything I did as proof. If I defended myself, I was spiraling. If I didn't, I was sulking. If I sounded tired, it was manipulation. If I sounded calm, it was calculated. She talked about me like I was a threat she was warning everyone about. The worst part wasn't that she believed it. The worst part was how effectively she could sell it. She started floating a specific story to our parents, that I was using the injury to get money out of Dad. She'd phrase it like she was protecting him. I'm just worried she's taking advantage. I don't think she's being honest about what she needs. You know how she can be. Then she tried to get Mom to cut me off completely, not with one big demand, but with a drip feed of doubts. The kind that makes you question your own instincts. She's always had a problem with responsibility. She's always been jealous. She's always looking for someone to blame. Always. 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 Like my personality had been diagnosed and my case was closed. I finally tried the thing people tell you to do when family gets messy. I had one calm, adult conversation with Dad that I didn't go in hot. I didn't accuse. I didn't bring up Kara's texts. I didn't even bring up the video. I kept my voice steady and my points simple, like I was presenting a work update. I'm hurt, I told him. I'm following the plan. I'm not making this up. And I need you to stop treating it like I'm asking for something wrong when I'm asking for help. He listened the way he always listened, present enough to claim he'd heard me, distant enough to avoid actually taking a side. Then he sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said the line I should have predicted. You know how your sister is. I waited for him to follow it with something like, and she's wrong. Or, I'll talk to her. Or, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Instead he added gently, like he was giving me good advice, just be the bigger person. There it was. The family's most sacred tradition. My job was to absorb what Kara did so everyone else could keep pretending things were fine. Dad, I said, still trying to keep it calm. Being the bigger person is starting to feel like being the only person. He looked pained for a second. Almost. Then his face smoothed out into resignation. I can't do this right now, he said. I have enough going on. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not into rage. Into clarity. If they were going to keep treating my reality as a debate, then arguing was pointless. Facts weren't working because they weren't listening for facts. So I went back to the thing I actually trusted. Documentation. That night I opened my banking app the way you open a window to check the weather, hoping for ordinary, bracing for bad. At first, it was small enough to doubt myself. A refund I'd been expecting wasn't there. Not a lot of money, but enough to matter when you're counting oranges. I scrolled back, thinking maybe it posted late, maybe it was pending, maybe I'd misremembered the amount. Then I saw an unfamiliar charge. It was small. The kind of number you could miss if you weren't looking. But it was tied to my name in a way that made my stomach go cold, like it belonged to an account or payment method that was supposed to be mine. I tapped into the details and stared at the line items like they might rearrange themselves into something innocent if I looked long enough. The money problem started as a weird glitch. Until it wasn't. The moment I stopped arguing about my injury and started checking numbers was the moment this story stopped being emotional and became provable. I didn't pull my credit report because I thought I was the kind of person who got their identity stolen. I pulled it because the banking glitch wouldn't stop blinking at the edge of my life. And I was tired of feeling crazy. I sat on my bed with my laptop balanced on one knee, brace digging into my skin, and told myself I was being responsible. Just checking. Just ruling it out. Just proving to my own nervous system that the numbers would add up if I stared long enough. Then the report loaded, and my body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air in the room. There was a new account. Not a typo. Not a duplicate. A real, open line with a balance attached to it. An amount I hadn't spent, on a thing I hadn't bought, with a start date that landed right in the middle of my injury timeline. Like someone had watched my life slow down and decided that meant my defenses were down too. Worse, there was an address update I didn't recognize. It wasn't a stranger's address across the country. It was close enough to be plausible, like the kind of change a human being could explain away. The kind of detail that makes fraud harder to argue, because it looks like a mistake instead of a crime. My stomach did that drop it does when you miss a stare. I scrolled, blinking hard. There was a hard inquiry I didn't remember authorizing. There were account notes that felt like a stranger had been inside my house and moved one object half an inch. Small, but violating. I stared at the screen long enough that the letters stopped being words and became shapes. And then, without drama, the dots connected themselves. Kara had access. Not in a conspiracy theory way. In a boring, ordinary, family way. The way you hand people your life in pieces because you think family means safe. The file drawer. That stupid family file drawer everyone uses because it's easier. The place where paperwork goes to die. Birth certificates, old tax forms, insurance cards, expired IDs, the kind of documents you never think about until you suddenly need them for something urgent. Kara had rummaged in it 100 times, always helping, always asking casual questions that sounded harmless in the moment. What's your middle name again? For the form. What address did you use on that job application? Just sign here so I can submit it. It's easier if I do it. Even the helping with paperwork era, when I was overwhelmed and she offered to take something off my plate, like she was doing me a favor instead of learning the exact shape of my life. I could see the moments now, lined up like pins on a board. That's when I started taking screenshots. Not because I wanted to be paranoid, but because I finally understood I was dealing with someone who could weaponize confusion. Someone who benefited when I couldn't prove what I knew. Receipt number 2 became a bundle. The way receipts always do when you stop treating them like a backup plan and start treating them like armor. A screenshot of the credit report entry with the new account and the date it opened. The email confirmations in my inbox that I'd ignored at the time because I assumed they were spam. Subject lines like, "Your information has been updated," and "Thanks for your application." A password reset notification I did not initiate, time-stamped late at night, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't already braced for impact. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt nauseous. Because the money wasn't the only point. The money was leverage. The money was a story generator. The money was a way to make unstable look official. I realized Kara didn't just want me embarrassed. She wanted me discredited. It explained the timing. It explained the smear. It explained why she kept pushing the leech label even when it didn't fit. If she could make me look unreliable, then anything I said about the injury, the crutch, the video, any of it, would land inside the frame she'd built. And that's when I opened the full birthday video again. I'd been avoiding it since I got it, like the truth might be worse in high definition. But now I needed it. Not for closure, because closure is a fairy tale, but for sequence. For context. For sound. The clip started earlier than the cropped version everyone had seen. The room was loud. People were laughing. Someone's phone camera did that casual wobble where nothing seems important yet. Then I moved, and the fall happened the way falls actually happen. Fast, stupid, unavoidable. In the full video, you could see what the cropped clip cut out. My foot catching wrong, the split second of imbalance, the attempt to grab a chair that wasn't where I thought it was. No theatrical pause. No throwing myself. Just gravity and bad luck. And then, right after I hit the floor, before anyone could even decide what kind of moment it was, Kara stepped in. Not to help me up. To take the crutch. It wasn't subtle in the full clip. It wasn't the kind of, "I'll hold this for you," gesture you could misread. It was a snatch. Quick hands. Possessive. Like she was grabbing the narrative before I could. In the background someone laughed. Nervous, unsure, and Kara's voice dipped low, close enough to the microphone to catch it. A whisper, sharp as a pin. "No one will believe you. They never do." My throat tightened so hard it felt like swallowing glass. She didn't sound angry. She sounded certain. Like she was repeating a family rule out loud. For a few seconds after that, the camera shook as the person recording shifted, and you could hear the room react. The shuffle of feet, the overlapping "Are you okay?" voices, the part where strangers perform concern in a group. And there, threaded through it, was Kara again, quieter this time, like she was narrating the ending she'd already decided. "Dad already said you're cut off." I paused the video and sat completely still, the way you sit when your brain is trying to protect you from understanding too much at once. Because this wasn't sibling pettiness. This wasn't "she's jealous," or "she's dramatic," or any of the excuses people use to keep things comfortable. This was strategy. This was her betting, confidently, on the family's reflex to doubt me. On my habit of going quiet. On my instinct to absorb. I replayed the whisper one more time, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to be sure I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't. So I did what scapegoats learn to do when nobody listens. I stopped talking, and started building a file. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning certainty. After the credit report, after the whisper, my emotions stopped being useful. They were loud, sure, but they didn't move anything forward. They just made me want to scream into a room that had already decided what screaming meant. So I did what I've always done, only this time I did it on purpose. Late at night, with the apartment quiet and my brace unstrapped on the floor beside me like a shed skin, I sat in the blue laptop glow and turned my life into folders. Not dramatic folders. Practical ones. A spreadsheet with tabs. Dates on one side, events on the other. A column for what happened, a column for who was there, a column for proof. I gave it the kind of name you'd give a work project, because that was the only way to keep my hands steady. Timeline. I made labeled folders the way people make prayers. Video. Full clip. Bank. Statements. Credit. Report/inquiries. Email. Confirmations. Texts. Kara. Work. Notes/accommodations. Medical. Visits/PT. Every time I found something that could be misremembered, I saved it twice. I started doing screen recordings, not because it was flashy, but because screenshots can be dismissed. A screen recording shows the date in the corner. It shows the scroll. It shows I didn't cherry-pick one line and pretend it was the whole conversation. I recorded the credit report page. I recorded the bank charge details. I recorded the password reset email, opening it, showing the timestamp, showing the address it was sent to. Then I built the compilation plan, the receipts that would hold up even if someone tried to laugh them away. Receipt number 3. The full unedited birthday video. I saved the original file, exactly as I received it. Then I saved the message thread where my cousin sent it to me, with the date and time visible. If the file had details attached, I kept them. I wasn't trying to be clever. I was trying to keep the chain intact. Receipt number 4. Bank and credit documentation. Statements showing the unfamiliar charges. Notes from customer service chats. Dispute confirmation numbers. Any email that said, "Your dispute has been received," or "Your address has been updated." Anything with a logo, a date, and language that didn't depend on my tone. Receipt number 5. Kara's texts, in sequence. Not the most offensive ones. Not the ones that made her look cartoon villain cruel. The ones that showed pattern. The ones where she called me a leech, then mentioned details about my finances she shouldn't have known. The ones where her concern sounded a lot like preemptive defense. I added any official letters or emails tied to the account and the address change. Boring, corporate messages that don't care about family dynamics. Proof that doesn't have a personality. Then I took real steps. Not the cinematic kind. The adult kind that feels like swallowing a rock. I froze my credit. I changed passwords, email first, then banking, then anything connected to two-factor authentication. I updated security questions with answers no one in my family could guess. I turned on alerts for every transaction, even the tiny ones, because tiny ones are how people test what they can get away with. I started requesting written communication only. If a company called me, I asked them to email confirmation. If someone offered a quick phone call, I insisted on a message. I wasn't trying to trap anyone. I was trying to stop the truth from evaporating. The weirdest part was how grounding it felt. When you've spent your life being told your reality is negotiable, a PDF with a date on it feels like a handrail. And while all that was happening, life still had to happen. I couldn't spreadsheet my way out of needing groceries. I couldn't screenshot my way out of physical therapy. So I rebuilt, slowly, in ways that didn't look impressive from the outside but were the first real control I'd had in weeks. I asked my job on paper for accommodations, the kind you can point to later if someone tries to pretend you never asked. I took what hours I could. I didn't beg for respect. I created a record of professionalism. I picked up a small remote consulting gig, nothing glamorous, just work I could do from my laptop without limping through a day that made my knee swell. It wasn't a comeback story. It was me patching my finances with whatever I could reach. PT became a different kind of montage. Incremental, unromantic progress. A few more degrees of bend. A slightly steadier step. Less time bargaining with myself before I stood up. I started tracking that too, not for drama, but because my body needed proof it was moving forward. And the entire time, in the background, there was a ticking clock. Dad's retirement dinner was coming up. One of those family events that everyone treats like a reset button. The kind of gathering where people say, "Let's not ruin the night," as a way of telling you to accept whatever version of events makes them comfortable. I could already picture Kara there, polished and sweet, telling the story with a laugh. Making herself the caretaker. Making me the problem. Letting everyone nod along because it's easier than reconsidering who they've been believing. A week before the dinner, a family text popped up like nothing had happened. An invitation written in that breezy, fake neutral tone. "Hope you can make it. It would mean a lot to Dad. Let's all be civil." As if civility is something you ask the scapegoat for after you've set the house on them. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling that old reflex, the urge to smooth things over, to show up grateful, to prove I'm not difficult. Then I looked at my folders. The timeline. The saved video. The credit report. The dispute confirmations. Kara's own words. By the time my family invited me back like nothing happened, I had enough proof to end the story they were telling about me. They thought I was coming to apologize. I was coming to close a door. The invitation didn't come like an invitation. It came like a request for obedience. Mom called in the early evening, voice warm in that way that usually means she's asking me to swallow something. Then she added the line that told me exactly what kind of reunion this was going to be. And, let's not bring up the birthday thing, she said, like she was asking me not to mention an awkward joke instead of the moment the whole story cracked open. I kept my voice even. So what are we doing there then? A pause. A soft sigh. Just be normal. It's your dad's night. Normal. Meaning. Pretend. Meaning. Let Kara keep her version. Meaning. Don't make anyone uncomfortable with facts. After I hung up, I stared at my timeline spreadsheet until the dates stopped looking like numbers and started looking like a map. I wasn't going to show up and perform forgiveness for a room that still thought my injury was a personality flaw. The next message was from Kara. It was the first time in weeks she sounded sweet, which made my skin crawl immediately. Her texts used to be sharp or smug. This one was honeyed, almost careful. Hey. I've been thinking. I hate how tense everything is. Can we just have a fresh start? For Dad. I didn't respond right away. I just waited for the second shoe, because Kara never sent sweetness without a hook. It came 2 texts later. Also, quick thing. Can you help me with something? I can't get into the account and I'm locked out. I think it's under your email. It'll take 2 seconds. There it was. The small favor tied to money and logins. The casual reach for access. Like she was testing whether I'd learned anything, or whether I was still the same person who would hand her the keys just to keep the peace. I felt something settle in me. Quiet, heavy certainty. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I didn't ask why. I sent 1 sentence. I'm not sharing access to anything. Please don't ask again. She replied with a sad face of a sentence. Wow. Okay. I'm trying. I didn't bite. I saved it. That week, I didn't do this alone. I met up with the people who'd become my found family in the way adults find family. Not through blood, but through behavior. The friend who never made me defend my reality. The mentor who had the kind of calm that doesn't come from luck, but practice. My friend cleared space at their kitchen table and helped me print everything. Not just the dramatic parts. The boring parts. The kinds of pages that don't hit emotionally but hit legally. Credit report page with the new account. Bank statements with the unfamiliar charge highlighted. Dispute confirmation emails. The message thread with my cousin sending the full video. A clean printout of the text conversation where Kara called me a leech, then asked for account access like she had every right. They didn't ask me a million questions. They didn't say, "Are you sure?" They just stapled and sorted and slid things into a folder like this was normal, like it was acceptable to take yourself seriously. My mentor gave me one piece of advice that stuck. Don't perform pain. Perform facts. I practiced out loud once in my car, like I was rehearsing for court. Not because I wanted a showdown, but because my family turns any emotion into a flaw, and I wasn't going to hand them ammunition. That's when I decided my rules. No shouting. No pleading. No explaining how much it hurt, physically or emotionally, because they'd already proven they don't hear pain unless it belongs to Kara. I would bring the timeline. I would bring the receipts. I would state one boundary, clearly, and I would stop talking after I said it. And I picked the setting carefully. Not my parents' house, where doors can close and voices can soften and reality can be rewritten in real time. Not a private coffee where they could corner me and later claim I misunderstood. The retirement dinner was perfect in the worst way. Public enough that they couldn't fully gaslight without risking witnesses, controlled enough that I could leave, and structured enough that the night had a built-in pressure to behave. I planned my exit like a safety feature. I drove myself. I parked where I couldn't be blocked in. I told one friend where I'd be and when I'd check in. I wore shoes I could walk fast in. I brought a slim folder that fit inside my bag without looking like a threat, because in my family, evidence reads as aggression. On the day of the dinner, I took 10 minutes before I left and looked at myself in the mirror. My knee was still healing. My life was still bruised around the edges. But my hands didn't shake the way they used to when I imagined standing up for myself. I wasn't going there to convince them I was good. I was going there to make it expensive to keep lying. I walked into that dinner with my knee still healing, and my hands finally steady. Dad's retirement dinner was in a private dining room that tried too hard to feel intimate. Low lighting, a long table, a tight semicircle of chairs that forced everybody into one shared frame. Dad sat at the head like the guest of honor, shoulders squared, a little overwhelmed in the way men get when attention is both earned and uncomfortable. Mom positioned herself slightly to his right, where she could scan the room without looking like she was scanning the room. Kara sat close enough to Dad that her laugh could land first, close enough that any story she told sounded like family history instead of opinion. When I walked in, Kara stood up immediately. "Look who made it," she said, bright and warm and performative, like she'd been practicing in a mirror. She hugged me for a beat too long, the kind of hug that's really a message. "See? I'm the good one." Mom's eyes flicked to my knee, then away. Dad's face softened in that cautious way people do when they're hoping the night stays simple. "Hey," Dad said, relieved, like my presence alone could be counted as forgiveness. I sat where there was an easy exit. Not dramatic. Just smart. My bag stayed close to my chair, my folder inside it like a spine. The dinner moved through appetizers and safe stories. Old work anecdotes, polite laughter, relatives telling the same compliments in slightly different words. Kara was on her best behavior in that way that never reads as suspicious until you understand it's a strategy. Every so often she'd catch my eye and smile, sweet as sugar, like we were in on a private joke. Eventually, when dessert menus were dropped like a pause in the conversation, Kara leaned back and tapped a glass with her fork. "I just want to say something," she announced. Mom's posture changed instantly. Spine straighter, face open, ready for the optics. Dad looked pleased, touched. A couple of relatives leaned in. This was Kara's element. An audience, a microphone, a moment she could control. Kara smiled at Dad first. "I'm so proud of you," she said, voice steady, warm. "You've worked so hard for this family." Then her eyes slid to me. "And I'm also proud of us," she continued, "because even when things get dramatic," she laughed lightly, the way you laugh when you want other people to join you without realizing they're being recruited, "we still show up." A few people chuckled politely. Someone murmured, "Family, right?" Kara lifted her shoulders in an exaggerated little shrug. "Some of us have had a hard year." She let it hang. "But it's good to see you back on your feet." It was bait. Clean, wrapped, delivered with a smile. The old version of me would have felt the heat rise in my face and tried to defend myself in a way that sounded emotional and therefore, in this family, guilty. Instead, I waited for the laugh to finish. I let the room settle. I kept my voice calm. "I'm not here to argue about my injury," I said. Kara's smile tightened. Mom's eyes sharpened with warning. I continued evenly, as if I were presenting a simple correction at work. "I'm here about what you did with my name, and what you did on video." The air changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Like someone lowered the music. Kara gave a small laugh. Too quick. "Oh my God. Are you seriously doing this here?" "I am," I said. "Because you've been doing it everywhere else." Dad blinked. "What are you talking about?" I pulled the slim folder from my bag and placed it on the table. I didn't slam it. I didn't fan it out like a threat. I just set it down like a fact that had finally arrived. "I'm going to show you 5 things," I said. "In order. Then I'm going to tell you what I need." And then I'm done talking. Kara's eyes narrowed, but she kept her smile, like she could still charm her way through it. I started with the simplest one. The thing that didn't care about anyone's feelings. First, I said, and tapped my phone. The full video. Dad frowned. What video? The birthday party, I said. The unedited one. Kara's laugh came out sharper. This is insane. I didn't look at her. I turned the screen toward Dad first, then angled it so Mom could see without leaning, then set it where the nearest relatives could see if they wanted to. I pressed play. The room watched. In the full clip, the fall happened fast and ugly, the way Rayol falls happen. You could see the angle. You could see me try to catch myself. You could see it wasn't staged. And then, clear as daylight, you could see Kara step in and snatch the crutch, not to help, not to stabilize me, but to take it. The camera picked up her voice, low and close. No one will believe you. They never do. Someone at the table made a small sound. Not a gasp. More like the involuntary exhale of a person whose brain just updated a belief. I let the video run just long enough for the second whisper to land. Dad already said you're cut off. I paused it. The silence after the video played was the first time my family had ever listened to me. Dad stared at the screen like it might change if he blinked. Mom's face had gone too still, the way it does when she's trying to calculate how to contain damage. Kara's smile was still there, but it looked glued on now. Her foot bounced once under the table. I moved on before anyone could start spinning. Second, I said, sliding a single page forward. My medical timeline. It wasn't a stack. It wasn't a dump. It was just enough. Appointment dates, imaging summary in plain words, PT plan, work restrictions note. No theatrics. No pleading. This is to end the faker story, I said, tone flat. I was injured. I followed the plan. I have the documentation. Kara rolled her eyes. Nobody said you weren't hurt. I didn't argue. I just looked at Dad. You've heard people say it, I said. You've watched it happen. Dad's jaw tightened slightly, and he didn't answer. Which was an answer. Third, I said, and this time my hand was very steady, my credit report and statements. I slid the printed credit report entry forward. Then the page showing the account. Then a bank statement line highlighted in yellow. Then the dispute confirmations. This account was opened under my name, I said. I didn't open it. This balance isn't mine. This address update wasn't requested by me. Dad's eyes flicked between the numbers and my face, searching for an escape hatch. Mom's voice went thin. Are you sure it isn't a mistake? Sometimes. It's not, I said. Not harsh. Just final. There are email confirmations. And there's a password reset I didn't initiate. Fourth, I said. The texts. I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. I showed enough to make the pattern undeniable. Kara calling me a leech, calling me unstable, then asking for access to an account under your email. Kara referencing financial details like she'd been inside my life, not just hearing about it. Kara laughed again, louder this time, desperate. Oh my God, you're so intense, she said. This is, like, you made a whole dossier. This is exactly what I mean. You're doing too much. That was tactic one. Laugh it off. Make the proof sound like a personality flaw. It didn't land the way it used to. Not with paper on the table and a video in Dad's hands. Kara's eyes darted, and then her face crumpled into the next move like she was changing masks. I was stressed, she said suddenly, voice wobbling. I've had so much pressure. You don't know what I've been dealing with. Everyone always expects me to hold things together and, she looked at Mom, then Dad, tears appearing on cue. I just wanted Dad to be okay. I thought she was taking advantage. I thought. That was tactic two. Cry and pivot to victimhood. Make her intention the story again. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. Then I looked at Dad, not at Kara. Stressed doesn't explain the credit account, I said. Stressed doesn't explain the address change. Stressed doesn't explain a password reset. And stressed doesn't explain whispering, "No one will believe you," while I'm on the floor. Kara's tears stopped for a fraction of a second, just long enough to show the gear shift. Her voice sharpened. "She's always wanted attention," she snapped, dropping the tremble. "She's always been like this. She keeps scores, she records everything, she twists things to make people look bad. She's jealous. She can't stand it when I..." That was tactic 3, attack my character. It was the oldest one. The one that used to work every time because no one wanted to confront a clean, smiling liar if it meant admitting they'd helped build the lie. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend my personality. I didn't argue about childhood. I slid a prepared envelope toward Dad, and a packet toward Mom. Inside was the one-page summary. Dates, amounts, account names, and a final line in plain print. "This is what I can prove." Then I said the only 3 sentences that mattered. "I froze my credit," I told them. I disputed the charges. I held Kara's gaze for the first time that night, not angry, just done. "And if this isn't resolved, I file a formal report," I said. "I'm not negotiating with my own identity." The room went quiet in a different way. Less shocked, more real. Dad picked up the credit report again, reading it like he was trying to find an alternate explanation hidden in the formatting. His hands looked older suddenly. Tired. Mom's mouth opened and closed once. Her eyes flicked to the relatives, to the door, to Kara, like she was scanning for exits. But there weren't any that didn't require admitting what was on the table. Kara sat very still now, tears drying too fast. She looked around like she expected someone to rescue her with a, "Let's not do this here." But nobody spoke. Not because they suddenly became brave. Because documents are hard to argue with, and video is hard to laugh away, and even my family understood, in their bones, the difference between drama and evidence. Dad's voice came out rough. "Kara," he said, and it was the first time that night he sounded like a father, not a host. "What did you do?" Kara inhaled sharply, ready to launch into another story, but the air had changed. The audience was no longer hers. I didn't wait for her answer. That was the point. I wasn't there to litigate my worth. I wasn't there to win an argument. I was there to set a boundary with consequences. I pushed my chair back carefully and stood. For one step, I chose to stand without the crutch. Not to prove anything to them. My body didn't owe them proof, but because I wanted the choice to be mine. Then I took the crutch in my hand anyway, because I still needed it, and pretending I didn't would have been another performance. I looked at Dad. "I love you," I said. "I'm not doing this anymore." Then I looked at Mom, because she would try to turn this into optics later. "I'll communicate in writing," I said. "About the account. Nothing else." Kara's voice came out thin, angry, almost panicked. "So you're just going to ruin Dad's night?" I paused at the door and turned back, just enough to let the room hear me without giving them more than they deserved. "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "I stopped you from ruining me." And I left before they could rewrite the ending in real time, before anyone could turn it into a misunderstanding, or a rough patch, or a sensitive moment. I didn't walk out feeling triumphant. I walked out feeling free, and that's a different kind of victory. The most satisfying part wasn't watching Kara squirm, it was realizing I didn't need her agreement. The aftermath didn't look like a movie. Nobody stood up and delivered a perfect apology monologue. There wasn't a single moment where the family collectively gasped and chose truth like it was easy. But something fundamental changed anyway. The lies got heavier to carry. Within a day, the cropped party clip disappeared. Not announced, not acknowledged, just gone. A quiet delete that said more than any caption ever had. A couple of relatives who'd shared it took theirs down too, suddenly not wanting drama, the way people say not wanting drama, when they've realized the drama has paperwork now. Kara backtracked in the only way she knew how. Half steps wrapped in defensiveness. First she tried to act like nothing happened, sending a chirpy message to the family thread about Dad's dinner being so emotional. That one didn't land. Too many people had seen Dad's face when the video played. Then came a written apology that read like it had been edited 12 times to keep her ego intact. It wasn't a clean confession. It was selective. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was stressed and overwhelmed. I didn't mean for things to go that far. But there were 2 lines I needed, and she did give them, because now she had to. She admitted she'd posted a cropped version of the video without thinking. And she admitted she'd used my information to handle something that wasn't hers to handle. The wording was careful, but it was specific enough to be pinned down later if she tried to rewrite it. The family split, predictably. Some people did what they always do. Defended Kara not by proving she was innocent, but by lowering the stakes. It was a misunderstanding. She didn't mean it like that. You know she gets anxious. But even the defenders stopped calling me a liar with their full chest. They couldn't. Not after the whisper. Not after the dates and the numbers. Not after Kara's own request for account access sitting there in black and white. And I stopped negotiating with the people who needed me to be wrong so they could stay comfortable. I set boundaries that were boring on purpose, because boring boundaries are harder to argue with. No shared finances, no access to my documents, passwords, logins, or accounts, no private conversations with Kara. If we're in the same place, someone else is present if communication is necessary, it's in writing. No calls. No quick chats. Any talk about money or accounts goes through formal channels only. I didn't announce these like a manifesto. I sent them once, clearly, and then enforced them without debate. Dad tried to apologize late. Not well. Not neatly. He called a week after the dinner, voice quieter than usual. He didn't lead with, "I'm sorry." He led with confusion, like he still wanted an explanation that wouldn't require him to confront his own choices. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said. I believed him, and I didn't. He didn't know because he didn't want to know. That's the truth I'd spent years protecting him from. "I brought it to you," I said. "And you told me to be the bigger person." Silence on the line. Then a rough exhale. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have listened. It wasn't cinematic. It didn't fix my childhood. It didn't undo the smear. But it was something real, a piece of accountability instead of a request for me to absorb. I'm not asking you to cry about it," I told him. "I'm asking you to respect what I'm doing now." He didn't love it, but he agreed. That was the only part that mattered. I kept my receipts saved, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as protection. Multiple copies. Multiple places. Because I'd learned the hard way that people who rewrite history rely on you getting tired of remembering. And slowly, my life stabilized. PT got easier in the small ways that actually count. Less swelling after a full day, fewer sharp surprises, more trust in my own body. Work improved as I leaned into what I could do consistently instead of what I could do perfectly. I took on more remote work, then steadier hours. The numbers in my bank account stopped feeling like a countdown timer. I didn't get a perfect family. I got something better. Leverage over my own reality. And once I stopped chasing my family's belief, I finally had room to build something that belonged to me. A few months later, my knee is stronger in the boring ways that matter. I can take stairs without planning my whole day around them. I can walk through a grocery store without scanning for the closest place to sit. Sometimes I still bring the crutch. Not because I'm ashamed or because I need to prove anything to anyone, but because healing isn't a straight line and I stopped punishing myself for that. The crutch isn't a symbol anymore. It's just a tool. Like a brace. Like a password manager. Like a locked file drawer. The family never became a fairy tale. Kara never turned into someone safe. A few relatives still orbit her version of events because it's easier than admitting they helped carry it. But the power dynamic didn't survive the receipts. And I learned something I wish I'd learned younger. People who benefit from your silence will call your boundaries cruelty. I didn't become vindictive. I became careful. I keep my documents where only I can reach them. I keep my credit frozen unless I'm actively using it. I keep communication in writing when something matters. I don't do quick favors tied to money, accounts, or logins, ever. Quietly, I started helping other people do the same. Not in a savior way. Just showing friends how to pull a credit report, how to save a message thread properly, how to ask for written confirmation, how to create a timeline when they're being spun in circles. The stuff that feels paranoid until you need it. Every now and then I think back to that night, the exact sound the crutch made when it hit the floor. Back then, it sounded like helplessness. Like everyone could see I needed something. Now, when I hear that sound in my memory, it means something else. It means I'm done explaining reality to people committed to misunderstanding it. So tell me, if your family publicly humiliated you and then got caught in the receipts, would you forgive or go no contact?